Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champions Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNEGames, Mitra Jordan and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health and how gaming affects us. If you're with us live in the chat, you can leave a question that I, Treavor Bettis, will ask them later in the show. And our topic today is going to be special interests. But before we get to that, who are you two for the fine folks who may not know?
He's going to get me to start, as always.
As is tradition.
Tradition!
Yes. So I'm Mitra Jordan. I'm a registered clinical counselor working out of Victoria, British Columbia. I see adults, youth, and families, and also couples. And I like games. I may have a few special interests, which we will get to. I may also have some just general interests. Generally, I like things that I'm interested. I don't know. But anyway, I tend to ramble.
None of us on the show can relate. We don't understand how that is at all. No.
Yeah.
Speaking of rambling, who are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Budget Matt Mercer. I'm in disguise because I've got a beard, and
Are you disguised? Are you Murgatroyd?
I think I killed Treavor.
Oh my god!
I think I killed Treavor.
You almost killed the host. You almost took me out in the first 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons. And I'm a clinical psychologist in Washington State. I am the clinical director at the now oldest mental health nonprofit to serve the game community, Take This. We're celebrating our 10th year of educating and helping around mental health in games, the game community, the industry, etc. Go check out TakeThis.org. And I'm also an expert on the applied use of role-playing games in clinical and learning settings. I am also autistic and ADHD, which is really going to come into play when we talk about special interests.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, I never heard of it myself. What's this thing? Ooh, shiny. Can I focus on any?
Is this something that I can fall down a rabbit hole of for 4 hours on a Friday night because I don't got anything else going on?
4, that's nothing. Haven't you stayed up till 4 in the morning anytime recently?
2 nights ago. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I never met it before in my life.
Absolutely not.
Early to bed, early to rise.
Yeah. All right, where do we want to start with special interests? Why are we talking about special interests?
Well, we're talking about it because these are terms that are used a lot in both the ADHD and autism community. And I'm starting to hear those terms used outside of those communities as well. And I think it behooves us to define how they are used specifically within the ADHD and autism communities, because it's different, and I don't want the term to get watered down and lose the meaning. So I was first introduced to the term special interest in the autism community specifically because from the medical model, the official symptomology of autism is that we tend to show what are called repetitive and stereotyped interests to an increased intensity well beyond what people would expect. And what that means in layman's term is our brains stay stuck and focused on one thing or a few limited things with an incredible intensity, regardless of the social situation, regardless of what's going on. And we just stay focused and ruminate and get on those things. Some of the really stereotypical ones that we can joke about. Trains seem to be one of the, which is not why I chose my office. I actually find the fact that I'm 50 feet from a train track really obnoxious. But every autistic person I know has one or two things that we are just like super into, and regardless, and we're going to info dump about it and all of these things. And the term special interest was a way of reclaiming that away from the pathologizing language of repetitive stereotyped interests. But I've also heard it used in the ADHD community with greater frequency, having to do with the hyper focus that is often a part of ADHD and uncontrollably. Although, and the way people talk about special interests manifesting in ADHD and autism are a little bit different.
Yeah.
But we're doing the show partially because we want to educate people. There's a big difference between having a passion for something, and lots of us have passions about things, and having a special interest in the way the ADHD and the autism community talk about those things. There's a big difference.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So in that regard, where do we want to start with this?
Well, Mitra, I just rambled at length, so.
But you did a very informative ramble that was right on track, and I could follow along. Unlike some of mine, where I think I do these tangents that are kind of like a conversational leap of faith, as somebody once said. Like, seriously, it's like, how did we get there from here?
Oh, we in my friends group, we call it the roller coaster.
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, which track did you go down to get to this part?
Well, I'm curious about one thing. Sorry, what? I know I interrupted there, which, by the way, is an ADHD trait. So, like, that doesn't mean it's okay to do it.
Yeah, but we're accepting of that here.
Okay, I would think it would be, can we further define or clarify what we mean when we say a passion is different than a special interest?
Sure. So, like, I'm gonna give an example of something for me. So when I get into with some of my special interests, like some of mine, movies, music, TV shows. In fact, we were talking about this just before the show. Mitra mentioned something having to do with the show Letterkenny. And I forgot what the line was, but as soon as she gave me the context, I was like, oh yeah, season 2, this episode. And it's the same thing with other shows. Like, my significant other mentioned an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I was like, oh, boom, this season, this episode number. When I was in high school, and one of my actual former hippie teachers mentioned a Beatles song and asked, do any of you know that? My response was absolutely. Magical Mystery Tour, named the year that it was released, named the sales numbers, and named which track number on the album that was. So there's being passionate about things, and then there's having super intense, focused knowledge in one particular niche area, regardless of the social situation, because it was really not appropriate in class when he asked a rhetorical question. Have any of you heard about this? Yeah, copyright, blah, 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 track number, written by this, produced in this studio, and blah, blah, blah. There's a passion. There's passions people have Then there's that.
I'll be honest. If I had been in that class we had never met, I would have looked across the room at you and be like, "Crap, I'm gonna be that kid's friend."
Absolutely, which is interesting, right? We will find our people.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's
No, we gather.
Yeah. So okay, I went through a time, and so I don't know if this may be relevant to how it works with ADHD. I'm curious because this is not my area. This isn't my wheelhouse of experience the way it is yours. But so when I was researching sewing machines, I probably memorized every model I was interested in as a way to compare it to every other model in that same brand.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then to look at the various other brands and what they were offering and why, and so it was this really, really deep dive. And I've forgotten it by now, but I did the exact same thing. Yes. Did you do yeah, because I did the same thing with our van, which I bought our Honda van, and I did a ton of research around it, which features, which thing, which blah, 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 and where to buy it and how much, and finding out the MRSP and all of this sort of stuff, and then bargaining from one car, one dealership to the other, and he'll offer me this, and what are you going to offer me? And like really got into it in a big way. Now I could not for the life of me remember how I did that. So there's a process, and then you forget. I've already forgotten with the sewing machine thing too. I have the one I want, thrilled, by the way. Yeah.
Well, that's something I've heard from a lot of people anecdotally in the ADHD community. There's not a ton of research that I've seen to date on this. But the way I've heard people talk about it in the ADHD community with autism and just autism, it tends to be often long-term singular focus, one or two things. With ADHD, there's the people seem to talk about cycles.
Yeah.
Like hey Trevor, hey Mitra, as just ADHDers without the autism component, how many hobbies have the two of you had in your lifetime?
You shut your mouth, okay? We don't need to talk about this. We don't need to bring numbers into this conversation.
I am going to ask your spouse, Trevor, and I am going to ask how many hobbies has Trevor had over the course of your relationship?
Oh my
and
God.
How intense were they for like 3 months?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Hey, okay, you know what? I'm going for the jugular on this one.
Oh, no.
Hey, Trevor.
Oh, no.
Does he like us or anything? I'm starting to wonder.
Trevor.
We're coming back with a new season with hostile Dr. B.
Yeah, Dr. B's bringing the heat. Hey, Trevor, how many unpainted minis do you have?
Okay, that's
a low blow. We're not talking about
Yeah,
my
we're
yarn
fighting.
stash either. Nobody
Listen,
mentioned
just
the
because
wool.
I have an unpainted Modron within arm's reach, and you know what? Maybe even a packaged Mimic. You know, it doesn't matter. Okay.
It's just a dish down. The cardigan was too hard.
But that's one of the things that I've heard a lot of people in the ADHD community talk about is cycles of intensity as opposed to prolonged intensity. And for those of us who are at the intersection of both, it's a whole lot of both. So me asking about your unpainted minis is projection.
All right,
Sure.
that's fair.
I will say one thing, and this may relate to how it works for you as well, Dr. B, but for me, and I think maybe for Trevor as well, the acquiring of materials to enjoy the interest is an interest of its own.
Oh man, the
right?
dopamine hit.
Right?
Yeah.
So searching around for the thing to get, I absolutely have all kinds of knitting materials. I've tons of beautiful yarn. I reached sable, which, by the way, in the knitting and even sewing community is stash above beyond life expectancy, people. Sable. The fact that we have an acronym, can I just point out?
That's beautiful. I love it.
I remember I was kind of following this person who does a bit of, who teaches about embroidery, machine embroidery. I may have gotten myself into that recently. Although I'm terrified, it's complicated. It's not like sewing. Okay. Anyway, then there's the threads that you can acquire from machine embroidery. And this person was like, yeah, because the acquiring of the stuff is a hobby of its own. And I was like, finally, somebody said it.
Yeah.
It's the hunt. It's the learning. And so this is part of the reason we wanted to talk about this, because the way it can happen for ADHD brains and autism brains is a little bit different than it can happen for those outside of those communities. But one of the other things is it's not always fun, because we can't turn it off.
Oh yeah. No.
Even when we want to.
We can't, and we can't maintain it. Like,
No.
I'm going through like a Soulsborne kick right now. Like, I've been playing Elden Ring a bunch. I beat it on Saturday, and I immediately started another character because that is still going. But it will just hit a day where like I'll be sitting there. I'm like, I can feel this was less dopamine today on this play. Okay, I'm eventually going to just not think about playing this in a few days and just switch to something else.
Yeah. I took the dorsolateral pathway in the game, but it just wasn't hitting the dorsolateral pathway in my brain.
Exactly.
Nerd humor.
Yay!
Yeah, I think the other thing that happens with it is that, yes, it wanes. And I think there can also be something demoralizing that happens.
Oh, yeah.
That is, you acquire things, you get excited about things. And then with me, with knitting, I realized, wow, this is more complicated. And maybe right now I don't have the bandwidth, right? Maybe I'll have the bandwidth later. I may well have the bandwidth for other stuff, because now complicated sewing doesn't put me off at all, but complicated knitting sure does. So my stuff sits there unused, and I feel super guilty about it, right? Because I've acquired things to make a hobby happen, and now I'm not using them, and
that's the very thing that drives a lot of us to have those hobbies, is also the very same thing that keeps us from completing them. And that is, impulsivity, because when you think about how executive functioning works, and for those of us who are autistic and those of us who are ADHD, we've got challenges with our executive functioning. Executive functioning is used for both starting things and at will, ignoring things at will, and maintaining them when things get less exciting. And we have regulatory challenges with all of that stuff. So we don't have as much control over when we start things, because shiny. I mean, that's a stereotype for a reason. But then maintaining that focus when we need to follow through is equally challenging for us. Also, our estimation of how much time it's going to take.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also, we see it out of context often, right? So it might seem, maybe I'm having a tough day, or maybe I'm going through a busy time, but my brain wants to rest somewhere fun. So it'll think about my hobby, which I don't necessarily have time to actually do. Maybe I don't have time to learn the complicated thing I want to make, but I'm still going to indulge in the hobby. So I might pull things out at random, or I might give it a try. If it were knitting, say, cast on a few things, or if it were sewing, cut out a few things, say, whatever it is, right? Pull out the paints, pull out the minis, but then my available time is done.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'll buy a thing to contribute towards the hobby, but then I don't actually have time to do it.
Yeah.
So then what was kind of fun to engage in then can become demoralizing.
Absolutely. We've actually, for those of you who may not know, but my significant other is Jessica McCabe at How to ADHD. And that's important for the context of what I'm about to say. Around our house, there's a saying that gets thrown around a lot at both of us. I don't think that's how time works.
I may have had my spouse throw that one at me occasionally.
I think Tara and I have both said that one.
Yeah, I think time is such a big one with ADHD. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the challenge is in estimating the amount of time it will take for things is a big thing for ADHD, and often overlaps with autism as well, because there is so much overlap in how those things can present. But I'm just gonna talk for myself here. Where the shame really kicks in for me, where the stuff that I'm really embarrassed about, is if people come over to my house and they see evidence of all the unfinished projects. And we're not talking one or two. We're not talking a few things. We're talking like, this cabinet in the garage is dedicated to this particular system of minis. The next one is a different set of minis. Over here, there's all the paintball stuff, because I used to be super into paintball up until about 9-10 years ago. And I still have my gear, because I swear I'm going to play again in between injuries that I seem to keep sustaining. And people see that it's like unfinished thing here, unfinished thing here, unfinished thing here, thing I was building here, house upgrade that I was working on here. And it's the sheer extent of it, and other people don't seem to struggle with that. And there's this overt or covert comparison, like, dude, why can't you function?
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my basement, which has evidence of hobbies in it all over the place. Yeah, things that there's just not time or energy for, but things that we love anyway and have. And I think this is the difference as well. Let me just reframe that for a second, right? So it's evidence of things that are incomplete. How about we say it's evidence of things that are in process? It's evidence of plenty. And the beauty of that, it's evidence of being able to have things that are related to what you love and what's in process that you can pick up when you're ready. Because just because there isn't time doesn't mean there isn't love.
Yeah. Well, Dr.
You should be a therapist or something.
Yeah, right.
You did make me think of something there that I wonder if either of you have an experience with. You're saying like that one specific hobby that you were like, I am gonna get back to that. Do either of you at any time when you're kind of looking at that stuff, the times that ADHD will let you look at that stuff, ever gone, I don't actually think I'm gonna get back to this. I should get rid of this.
Yeah, and you know what problem I run into then? I actually was doing this with my knitting stuff. I reorganized a bunch of which is great because I have more space in this room, which functions as an art thingy too. But I was looking through things and I did get rid of some of it. But the problem for me was I was looking through all this beautiful yarn. And of course, it reignites the interest in using it. So I think this is the big, you really have to get to a point where you're like, yeah, I know that was a phase. And there are definitely things that have been phases that, I would get rid of. And I have gotten rid of. But then there's the things that are cyclical, but are also constants.
Yeah.
Like you're never not going to love minis. How much you'll paint them, you may need to think about that. But are you going to stop loving them at this point? Likely no. I've sewn for most of my life, ever since I was 6 years old. Am I going to sew every day? No, but I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to do it because I love it. And because where else am I going to get a dress with dragons on it? Like, come on. So, yeah. So it's things like that. Like you have to, if it still brings you joy, if you will, and I'm not so much a Kondo fan, but if it still sparks something in you that says, yeah, I'm resonating with this.
Yeah.
It is difficult. And how do we, and this is a question that I think we do need to figure out an answer to, how do we control how much leeway we give that?
Right.
Like at a point, it might feel demoralizing. You're saying that, people, there's an internal sort of like, how will they respond to me if there's all this unfinished stuff? But how will you respond to you with this unfinished stuff? Is it okay for you, or does it just kind of make you feel bad about the things you're not able to get to?
Well, that's really it. The only areas where, and again, I'm going to speak just for myself here, the only areas where I feel the shame around this stuff is two things. One of them from the ADHD side and one of them from the autism side. That when it's ADHD, it's comparison to other people. Like how do other people exist? How am I supposed to have my house? How many hobbies am I supposed to have? And so it's really a comparison to other people's standards. And when I think about the autism side, it's a similar thing. It's a comparison to other people's standard. It's an internalization of what I think I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Did I talk about my hobby too much? Did I talk about my special interest at a time when it was really inappropriate by other people's standards to talk about it? Did I transition into it? Does the other person care to learn about does the other person care about the temperature at which egg proteins coagulate? And how important that is. No, I know you do. You are a baker. You need to know that. But it's so really the shame comes from not from the internalization of that message. You shouldn't be like this. And sadly, and I know I'm not the only one on this, we've had ample evidence. ADHD folks, autistic folks, ADHD folks, we've had evidence our entire lives of people saying you shouldn't be like that.
Oh God, yeah.
Why can't you just be normal?
Yeah.
Dude, you need to get out a little bit. Why are you reading this book when you came over to somebody's house?
Yeah.
That's rude.
I started getting aggressive at those people. Like Mitra was saying the interrupting thing earlier. I've done it before. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I have ADHD. I interrupt people sometimes. Sorry about that. And someone was just like, that's not an excuse. I went, you're right. It's a threat. I will interrupt you.
Right. So
I think I'm just remembering that my first instance of recognizing, now putting words to it, that somebody may have had a special interest was when I was growing up with my granddad, and I was about 12. And he had this really good friend who had a farm in the countryside. And it was kind of one of those gentleman farmer situations. The guy had some chickens, he made some money off it, but really he was just living it up in the countryside. And he had a, lovely but basic house, but he also happened to have kind of an entertainment room situation, and I had never seen the like. I had never seen that you could have a whole room dedicated to, like, it was like a den, right? It had the TV and it had the VHS tapes, because I'm old, and it had books and things, and just kind of evidence of his life and things that he loved. And in a side cupboard on the left side, it had a whole series of binders. And in these binders were comic books. And it was all the Disney comic books. And it was Donald Duck and Goofy. And, it was all of those comic books. And there must have been hundreds of them. You can imagine, I loved going to visit this guy. I mean, he had tamarind trees. And I love eating tamarind is a sour fruit that comes in a bean pod, and it's delicious. And I could pick the tamarind off the tree. So I could pick myself a tamarind stack and then go sit down and read all these comics, and no one would bother me. There weren't any other kids there. There weren't any other rules there. There weren't things I had to do, but I could really just indulge in being there and enjoying this. And I thought, there is an adult who collects comic books.
Heck yeah.
And he doesn't mind my reading them. And he's not collecting them to give them away or anything. They're not, they're in these binders. He's even used a 3-hole punch. I know. But he's got these comic books, and they're very, very readable, and he's happy to share them with me. I could just go in there and read them.
I love
Kids
that.
happy. It's all good.
That's fantastic. Well, that's a. I was gonna do the disclaimer, but if you got something else.
One more point.
Mm-hmm.
I think for kids who are struggling with ADHD or ASD, to know there's adults around them who understand, who share in their hobbies, and it doesn't even have to be overt, it helps us so much.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of my development, of just knowing it was okay. No one else was telling me it was okay. Why are you still reading comic books at your age? Why do you like fantasy? Why this? Why that?
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, let's take a quick break to remind our viewers of our disclaimer, and then we'll be back to talk more about special interests, maybe even our own.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
One. Okay, so what are our special interests?
Ooh. All right. I could start.
Yeah.
I could at least mention a couple. So I knit badly, but it feels good and it's great to do while you're watching TV. And this, by the way, is a dishcloth, nothing special. And I have found them really useful. So when I can't think of anything, and certainly can't think of anything to knit, I'll do that. I have knitted a blanket or two, by the way.
Ooh.
Also, again, while it's bulky, it doesn't require much thinking. All right. I also happen, I did not make this, but I love this so much. This is my D&D character.
Oh my
Her
God.
name's Lyra, and she's a bard. And this is made by I wish I could remember her name. I'm so sorry, because it wasn't me that did the ordering. It's somebody that Eric found who's the daughter of somebody who knows, and she makes these beautiful crocheted things. So yeah, there's a little dagger, or I think it's actually meant to be a sword. There's my book, and there's the harp. Well, actually the lyre, to be more clear, which I actually have one. That I play very badly, because musical I am not, but I strum it and sing also out of tune. But I can put together a limerick. That's the thing. I love words too. Okay, and she turns into a cat, and this is excellent because I adore cats. I would call them a special interest, I guess. I happen to have 4. So maybe I'll start there and let you. I have a few more, but did we want to intersperse?
we got
taking turns. Like I mentioned, often movies, music, and other forms of visual media, but also cooking. And I just love to cook. It's one of the things that has carried me through a lot of things in life. But yeah, movies and music and other forms of visual media, I lock on to stuff. And Jess jokes about this, that I can just remember the things I've seen in a weird way that other people can't. Like, I'll watch something that, she has loved her entire life. And after watching it once, I'm like, yeah, but you remember that shot where like the camera slowly panned up from the downright corner and gave us this illusion of size because of the angle? And she's like, what are you talking about? The movie you showed me. You've seen it once. Yeah. And it's just one of those things my brain latches onto. And especially when it comes to things like the Beatles, I remain super into the Beatles. I don't know why it was the Beatles, but super into the Beatles, and have been for 30 years. I just cannot explain that, but I have opinions. And like my best friend would say, wrongly, that which one was their best album between Abbey Road and the White Album. He is incorrect. But and it's often watching the same shows over and over and over and over and over again, because routines and repetition are a thing that go along with autism often. The cooking, music, other hobbies tend to cycle through in waves. Beer making as part of the cooking thing has been for 20 odd years that I get just pretty into. What again, cycles, minis, playing various games, TTRPGs. I made a career out of that. So.
I think that one of the challenges is when we're cycling into something or in something, it's very present for us.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time, if someone says, "What are your interests?" I might not even think to mention, it's like, "Oh, that's gone for now," yeah.
But that's part of the double-edged sword.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's we get so intensely focused on these things, everything else falls by the wayside, and that's one of the things that people who aren't ADHD or autistic seem to be able to control a little better, is moderating that intensity. But we had skipped past Treavor in getting on this tangent. Treavor,
do tell.
Obviously, like, writing is there, but like I do writing as like a thing that I'm like, I'm going to publish a book one day and all that stuff. But definitely one thing that I do have that's connected to that is stationery. Hey, look, my book got caught in the green screen.
Oh my goodness.
Notebooks everywhere.
Prismatic journals.
They're just happening all over the place. There's just so many. Oh, look, there's some Hobo Nietzsche over here. My books are weighing down my headphones now.
Hey, Treavor,
Yeah?
I hear the first rule of journal collecting is you do not use the journals.
Shut up.
I went through
Each
that.
one of them has a purpose.
Yes, of course. And also it's beautiful.
No, I like...
This is...
Oh, good.
Go on.
No,
please.
what I was gonna say is, like, yeah, I have like a different thing for each one of these. I do still very much have the, like, okay, I'm going to do a project that is around stationery. I'm going to get something that's special for that, because I kind of make a thing out of it, because then I can get more excited about it and I can focus on it longer. Let's see, where are they? Some of these notebooks here are 2 different writing projects. Yeah, here they are. So, like, this one, which actually has this cool little sticker that I got, says "Writers Gotta Write." So this
is that a threat or encouragement?
Yes. Also, Black Die Society. So yeah, this one is a novel that I'm working on, and I have I like the Lundstrom ones because the pages are numbered, and so I can actually go through when I'm filling stuff out and put in the table of contents where it is, so I can still find it later. This one's a webcomic thing that I'm working on, so like I have like a process now for when I'm going to get a notebook or anything like that, and for the reasons for it. And my wife has the same thing, so we have conversations about different notebooks and pens, and like, she's into the fountain pens, like that's her special interest. She knows way more than I do about fountain pens. I'm just like, I just need a G238. That's all I need. But it has to be this pen. That's another interesting thing. I have to write with this pen. If it's not this pen, I'm mad.
No, that's sensory bad.
Yeah. Like, I have these ones, which is for just notepad when I'm at work for quick notes. This is what I write in notebooks with. If I don't have one of these, I've literally not written.
That's the G2?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep, it's G2.38. It's best pen in the entire world.
I am not taking notes for fear of going there.
But like one of the other ones that I used to have that was audio editing. I used to, like, I had this weird thing. Surprise, surprise. I wrote Star Wars fan fiction. I know, shock. At one point,
the editor strikes back.
At one point, I decided I was going to take music from the Star Wars soundtracks and edit them to fit the scenes that I wrote. And so I got super into audio editing in high school, but I didn't have the ability to get a good audio editing program, so I used Windows Movie Maker. And fun fact, that actually got me really good at audio editing, because if you could edit like 50 songs on Windows Movie Maker, you can edit them anywhere. But now I just do that, when I do podcast editing and stuff. Like that was a weird special interest. Oh my gosh, this became relevant and useful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, it's worth talking about something that I think a lot of folks, especially in the autism community, face, is that we tend to be cool with other people when our special interests are relevant to others. Like if you, my special interests also include people, which is part of the reason I'm a psychologist. I love people and all of their quirks, and I find people fascinating. And that's of use to other people, but we tend to stigmatize people whose interests are so niche.
Yeah.
And we don't shut up about them because that's our interest. That's our world.
Yeah.
And so that I just love people to think about the fact, like, if you know somebody in your life and they are info dumping at you about their special interest and it's not related to stuff you're interested in, it's such a gift to give us to show interest in our interest in our special interests, like asking us questions about what we're info dumping at you. You've earned a friend for life.
Absolutely, you really have. And I'd like to add to that, in that people's interests, and not just ours, also change over time. And the connections you make with people don't need to be based on all of the same shared interests.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to be able to do fun things together, obviously. But we can also make room for other people's interests, and in fact, even think of ways that they connect to ours or ours to theirs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Mitra, you were hinting at another special interest that you wanted to talk about. Do you want to talk about that one real quick, or are you good?
Whoops. Losing my earpiece. Let me see.
What's the thing we talked about yesterday?
No.
Of course, Animal Crossing, and generally games, because I'm not playing as much. I actually haven't played Animal Crossing in quite a while, but there's a whole bunch of fun games on the Switch that I like, as well as I haven't really been playing PC games. I used to love World of Warcraft. I used to play it all the time, and I used to play it in a guild. But so I played it, I played lots of in-game and dungeons and things like that. But the thing is, if you don't have someone to level with or to play with, it's less fun. And then it takes me away from everyone in my life. So one of the things I've really worked to do with my special interests is have them not take me away quite as much. And if I play WoW, I'm not engaging with any of my family or my current friend group. And that doesn't really work for me in terms of where it fits in my life. So I think that is somewhere I've learned to really draw the line for myself. It's like, yeah, that could be cool, but I know I don't enjoy playing it on my own. I know I could find people to play with, but they'd take away from all my other experiences there's much more overlap. So there's that. And obviously cooking. Love cooking and baking.
Almost happened again. So we were talking about this yesterday in the pre-production meeting, and there was an error with Mitra's microphone at just the most appropriate or inappropriate time. And we were talking about special interest. And Mitra just casually says, "I love cooking." But Treavor and I, because of the error in her microphone, we hear, and of course there's cocaine. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Trevor's like, you heard that too, right? I'm like,
well, I just kept going with it. Then I saw you react. I'm like, you heard that too. Okay, good. Okay, we're running a little bit low on time because we do have a show that is now coming up after this one. So I do want to get some time to do some viewer questions. And this one is a special viewer named Mars, who is also a mod. So Mars says, are special interests lifelong? Do you tend to shift and evolve into other subjects or remain focused on that one subject? I've often hyper-focused on any number of things and will talk about them endlessly if prompted, but rarely do they last terribly long. I don't know if this qualifies as a special interest or not.
I mean, I think for me, what I've noticed about the things that I love or get kind of hyper-focused on is they do tend to broadly relate to a category of interest. Okay. So if it's cooking, I might be focused on bread baking for a while, right? I want to perfect something. If it's crafts, because that's the broader category, there's sewing, there's knitting, there's embroidery, there's, for some people, woodworking and other stuff. Pottery, I tried for a little while. It didn't really get off the ground for me. But I think that's, if you look at the broader category of interest, does it fit into things that are consistent for you? Like games are one I think we can all agree is consistent, but what we're playing specifically and what we're into within that might change.
Yeah.
Often does.
Yeah. There's not as much research. There's not as much research that I am aware of on this. So most of the information I have comes from discussions within both the autism and ADHD community that I've had with people both professionally and personally. And yeah, categorically, it seems to say the same for a lot of people. But again, some people it's really intense and lifelong. For some people, it can be cyclical. So it kind of comes down to our favorite 2-word answer for all of this stuff, and it depends. But for me, categorically, I cannot play single player RPGs when I'm not on vacation.
Yeah,
because I will lose track of everything else. And this is what I mean about the double-edged sword that comes to these special interests being different than just a passion. I will not sleep. I played World of Warcraft once.
For 8 hours straight.
Well, I didn't even know 8 hours had passed. And I looked up and it was 8 hours later. And I was in grad school at the time. And I just went, oh, this is a bad idea. I cannot play this.
Yep.
Yeah. 100% couldn't have done it in grad school. To kind of add to that, I think that the capacity to discriminate when we're in the throes of a special interest kind of goes away. And for me, the most worrying aspect has sometimes been other people don't matter as much as the interest.
Yeah.
And that is something where I really have worked to draw the line, because that is not okay. Because the thing I taught my kids is people are more important than things.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're in the middle of the game, you have to figure out how to answer the question, or you need to stop and come have dinner, or so-and-so's at the door, your friend is here, you can't ignore them in favor of the game. Like, people are more important. So when I find myself kind of going, I just want it all to go away, unless I've created space for that in my life where it's like, yep, all things are taken care of. Today I'm doing this. Don't interrupt unless there's an emergency, which is fine. It's not like you can't prioritize an interest. It's just that when you feel like everything else, go away, I don't want to, I just, whatever it is, that's the not okay piece that you have to watch out for.
Yeah.
And to leapfrog onto that, into a question that I did see in the chat. I don't know if you were going to bring this one up, Trevor. It just seemed like a really good point. Somebody asked about how do we know if things have gone too far.
That was Vaxstrom.
So, if you, that's one of the things that for me, because there are plenty of people out there that I've worked with who I've known personally who they don't want a ton of other people in their life, and that's the choice they make, and cool, so they can focus on their special interests, and that's great. For those of us who do make the choice to have these other relationships, that's for me, my line is because I willingly, wantingly have people in my life, and turns out they have needs of their own for some reason. The audacity. But when my decisions and my activities and my ruminations and hyperfocus affect them, that is a huge red flag for me. Like, something's got to change here.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think, if you structure your life to have fewer people or no people, you need to consciously figure out for yourself if you value relationships and what that means. And did you want to put any energy into them? Because if you put energy into them, you get energy back, with a good and trusted friend, partner, even your work environment. If you don't put energy in, you don't get energy back. If that's okay with you, maybe that truly is okay. Maybe it's okay because it's scary and because of other reasons that you might want to examine.
Yeah.
But if you're happy, like I'm happy, I'm fulfilled. I'm content. Yeah, that's fine. Right. So
I guess that's what it comes down to, and this is where I generally, when people ask me questions like this is the point where I say, hey, maybe you want to reach out to a mental health professional and talk about this with them. Is this impacting the kind of life you want to live?
Yeah.
If this is allowing you to live the kind of life you want to live, then bully for you. Good on you.
But don't use your special interests to hide from the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to engage with the world and you haven't figured out how, or there's trust issues or there's trauma or whatever, these are good things to work out, to get some help
Consider
with.
checking out our episode on distraction versus avoidance.
Yeah.
We did an episode
It's
on
really
that.
good, this one.
Oh
We
man,
did.
yeah, that's a good topic.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that.
Okay, we're gonna do two quick last ones before getting out of here. There's gonna be two that we're not gonna get to. However, remember we do a Q&A at the end of each season, so be sure to check back then to see if we get to them then. Gelatinous Rubik's Cube says, question, do you have a resource where I can learn more about ADHD? Some of the things you describe are me to a T. Thanks in advance, and good seeing you all again.
Do I have a resource where you can learn about ADHD? Do I live with that resource? Probably. Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but I don't think I'm wrong.
No, you're not.
I promoted How to ADHD's YouTube channel long before we were dating.
Yeah. No, that
it's just good.
I've told family members to check out Jess's channel. Like, it is genuinely a really good place to learn about what ADHD is.
Yeah, I'm comfortable recommending Jess's channel to clients.
Yeah.
The research is there, and she's a great resource for people and a real help in terms of how people can understand their own variety, if you will, of ADHD, what's happening for them, and where their tools might be and where they might need to reach out for help. So
unlike a lot of folks on the internet, especially TikTok, that give out a lot of erroneous information, I know for a fact that Jessica has a whole team of researchers and consultants that vet the stuff she puts out into the world, because she wants it to be good and she wants it to be reliable. So yeah.
There we go. Last question we're going to do is from Rat with Wings. Question, Trevor, regarding Lundstrom notebooks, lined, grid, or dotted? All of the above. Depends on the...
Why restrict yourself?
It depends on the project. I mean, I think right here, let's see, this one should be grid. Is it? Yes, it is, because it's going to be for drawing dungeons. So, depends on the project. So yeah, I think that is a good place to wrap this one up. Friends, if people wanted to find you on the interwebs, where could they do so?
On Twitter, I'm at Mitra Jordan. And of course, you can find me on the internet at mitrajordan.com. Oh, yes, sorry, I gotta say it. And this guy is everywhere. No, this.
No, yeah, I read the first one. Yeah.
No, you got it. But anyway, other way. There we go. I'm around. You can find me at the Dr. B, TheeDoctor, B as in boy, on all the socials. But more importantly, follow TakeThis.org to keep up to date on what we're doing in terms of some free mental health resources. Our recently released free resources and educational modules for burnout in content creation. I'm biased, but again, I'm not wrong.
I'm going to start using that. I'm biased, but I'm not wrong. I like that one.
I want that on a t-shirt.
I do too. It's really good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I think that's that's gonna do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much to Mars and Martin for moderating the chat, and thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these conversations. I believe the streaming schedule for the week it's to what the normal should be going forward. We'll see how it checks out. Be sure to check Twitter, Reddit, and Discord for those for that schedule. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Champion Psychology. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.